A few weeks ago, I talked about how your grocery bills are probably about to get a lot more expensive if Donald Trump follows through on his plan to deport millions of immigrants and also impose tariffs on our trade partners. I also mentioned there's a good chance that the food we buy is going to get more dangerous. So let's talk about that, why things might get worse, whether we'll see more food recalls, how we can protect ourselves. And no, this video isn't even going to be about Trump's pick for the Department of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., who drinks raw milk with bird flu in it. I'm not even going to mention him after this. Don't drink raw milk. No, this video is about the inevitable dangers that come from deregulation, which is the one thing Republicans do today that they've been doing since Reagan. Since winning the election, Trump and his team have made it very obvious that they were lying about not knowing anything about Project 2025. Wow, if only someone had known and warned us. And that a major part of that blueprint is the further defunding of the Department of Agriculture, particularly targeting the enforcement of food safety. For instance, they specifically recommend changing the current law that says that meat sold across state lines must come from facilities that have been approved by federal inspectors. Instead, they think it should be up to, say, Alabama to decide how many grams of human fecal matter are allowed on the drumsticks that are going to be sold in New Jersey. Sorry, Alabama, I don't mean to pick on you. It's just that you tend to rank near the bottom of every list of states in things like education, health, maternal mortality, cancer, murder, stuff like that. So I'm just going to assume that hygiene and safety regulations are also pretty grim over there. But the fact is, any state could have a lapse in oversight, and without federal oversight, there will be more outbreaks of foodborne illness, and the response will be much slower considering that state inspectors have no standing to recall products sold in other states. Of course, there's always the chance that Trump will do all those other Project 2025 things he's promised to do, but skip this one. That would be great, but with a historical perspective, I'm not exactly filled with optimism. You see, I was actually alive 8 years ago when Trump first became president, back when no one, not even Trump, thought he was going to win. Despite his lack of preparation, Trump was quickly able to limit the FDA's impact on companies producing potentially tainted food, with a 33% drop in the number of warning letters that the FDA sent out in the first 2 years of his administration, and a 26% drop in official injunctions. In 2020, when a little coronavirus started zooming around the world killing a bunch of people, Trump's FDA stopped inspecting foreign and domestic food processing facilities, dairy farms, and animal feed processors. The administration also started imposing permanent measures like deregulating meat inspections, revising the methods for assessing pesticide risks, and overhauling one of the country's eminent environmental statutes. Also in 2020, Trump issued an executive order that was basically written by the meatpacking industry, according to an investigation by ProPublica. This order allowed meatpacking plants to remain open despite the pandemic, leading to at least 59,000 workers contracting coronavirus and at least 269 workers dying in 2020 alone due to the plants insisting workers come into the plant regardless of symptoms. That's according to a 2021 report from a congressional subcommittee that doesn't even take into consideration the family members and the rest of the general public that interacted with those workers. That's a bit disturbing considering that experts are currently closely monitoring the spread of bird flu in poultry, dairy cows, and other farm animals, like the first pig that contracted it in Oregon in October. The current mutation of bird flu is unlikely to cause a pandemic, but the fact that it can hop into pigs doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture for us humans who share a lot of biological similarities with pigs. I'm not saying you should panic, but I am saying that if I were a cop in Oregon, I'd go vegan just to be sure. So if you've been enjoying the frequent high-profile food recalls this year, there's going to be a lot more fun over the next 4 years and longer, as these kinds of deregulation can take years or even decades to rectify. As the Washington Post reported, the amount of tainted food in our supply is about the same as it has been in the past few years, but you're seeing more alerts about it, in part because the FDA is actually doing their job, and companies are often voluntarily issuing recalls before there's a huge problem. But it still speaks to a serious issue at the source. They quote Frank Yanis, a former FDA deputy commissioner for food policy and response, who says, sure, if a contaminated food product is on the market, we need modern recall systems to retrieve it and prevent additional illnesses. But we should be clear that having to execute a food recall is a failure in the primary order. It's a sign that a food production system was not under control. That's all a lot of bad news, but what can we, the consumers, do about it besides just make ourselves a sandwich and hope we don't die? I've seen a number of people advocate for growing your own food at home in order to address this problem. And this is actually something I can weigh in on because I do that very thing. I know, my apologies to the conservatives in my comments on the trad farm wife video who wanted to believe that I could never hack it on the farm. Thoughts and prayers to you. But yeah, I really enjoy growing my own food at home. Ever since I was lucky enough to buy a house with a yard in 2020, I've been experimenting with it. I started with tomatoes, then I did beans, cucumbers, herbs, onions, eggplants, carrots, lettuce, broccoli. Now I'm trying out more greens and Brussels sprouts and beets and radishes through the winter. And I agree that everyone should try to grow their own food. Even if you're only in a small apartment, you can only have a little herb garden in your kitchen window. I think it's worth doing. A lot of cities even have community gardens where you can get a plot and do whatever you'd like. And I think there are many benefits to that. For instance, there's a real sense of accomplishment in growing food that you can eat. You also get a better perspective on what kind of work goes into the food that we mindlessly scoop up without thinking at the grocery store. You can also grow more delicious food than what you can find at the grocery store. And sometimes it comes at a cheaper price, depending on the food and the cost of your own labor. Those are the benefits. Here's the drawback. You absolutely will not grow enough food to survive. Sorry, you just won't. You're not that guy in The Martian growing enough potatoes to live with just math and poop. Growing stuff is fun, but farming is hard. You need a ton of space. You need to repel pests like gophers and birds and squirrels and deer. You need to repel disease with crop rotation and careful inspections. You need to figure out exactly how much water each thing needs, what kind of soil they need, what kind of nutrients, what kind of acidity. You need to figure out what can grow next to what. Some things will kill things if you put them next to each other. Unless you have a greenhouse or a grow room, you can only grow things that are in season. And too much rain or too little rain or too much sun or too little sun could mean that you're not going to be harvesting shit next month. All of that is fun if you're like me and have a bit of space, you like learning new things, and you're not going to go hungry if things go wrong. Which it will for the first several years, if you're anything like me. So what do we do if we can't grow our own food? Well, for a start, learn to cook. Follow the current FDA's food handling standards. Wash your hands, keep raw food away from cooked food, cook everything to the correct temperature, which varies by food item, and refrigerate your food immediately. If you do all that and do it religiously, you will not get sick from cooked food. It's uncooked or pre-cooked food, lunch meat, raw food like sushi and fruits and vegetables, where there's always going to be a danger. That's why vegetables account for more food poisoning than any other type of food. Remember that McDonald's recall that happened a few months back? It wasn't dodgy beef, it was the raw onion on top of it that caused the problems. It's great that you wash your veggies, but it won't necessarily get rid of E. coli, salmonella, and other dangerous pathogens. You can wash your lettuce in bleach, and it still could have pathogens if it was harvested in such a way that introduces those pathogens into the very tissue of the vegetable. The FDA has regulations to try to prevent that from happening. They might not next year, and they already don't necessarily have enough enforcement on it. So yeah, that's what we're looking at for food safety in 2025. If you can grow your own food, that's great, definitely worth doing. But it's also worth writing or calling your state representatives to ask for strict state-level food safety regulations. And if you get them, shop locally for your produce through things like CSAs, which can deliver local produce right to your door. And consider switching from fresh to roasted vegetables. Or, feel free to swing by my place if you really need some lettuce for your sandwich. Actually, no, don't do that. That's weird. Just hit me up if you need gardening advice. Only for the dozen things that I've learned to grow. And only if you're in zone 10B. I'm sorry, you guys. It really is tough. but fun. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.